This guy. Nope. Not him. Definitely not him. Ah, yes, him. This guy is named Josef Čapek, and he was the man behind the word. Brain Fried presents Robot, the word that means slave. Prague, 1920. The war was over. At least that was the official story. Europe had packed the bodies away, polished the metals, and begun the difficult business of pretending it had learned something. Karel Čapek lived in the middle of that nervous new world. He was a Czech writer with a sharp eye for progress and the unfortunate habit of looking underneath it. The First World War had introduced humanity to a new kind of efficiency. Machine guns could kill without anger. Artillery could destroy a village without knowing its name. Factories could produce boots, bullets, and widows by the wagon load. The machines had behaved beautifully. It was the people who had become difficult to repair. Now the factories were growing larger. Assembly lines were growing faster. Every businessman with a clean collar was dreaming of the perfect worker. A worker who never slept, never complained, never joined a union, never stared at the factory owner with that quiet, complicated expression which suggested he understood the arrangement. Čapek began writing a play about such workers. Artificial people made in factories. They would be cheaper than humans, stronger than humans, and, most importantly, obedient. Well, obedient for a while. There was only one problem. Čapek didn't know what to call them. Automaton was available, but it smelled of laboratories and expensive clocks. It described something that moved. It didn't describe something that suffered. These creatures weren't merely machines. They were labor manufactured without a childhood, muscle without memory, hands without wages. Čapek needed a word with dirt beneath its fingernails, a word that understood the foreman's whistle, a word that woke before sunrise and belonged to someone else until dark. So he sat at his desk, surrounded by rejected syllables, while the alphabet crawled around him like a box of nervous insects. And then he did what writers have done since the first poet got stuck halfway through a sentence. He asked his brother.
Ouch, I dropped my cig. Sorry, what was I saying? Oh well, anyway. So, I'm having this idea version of how the robot word was started. Let me try out some of my Oscar-worthy acting ability. And scene. Josef said, then call them robots. Karel said, robots? Josef said, from Robota, forced labor, the work a serf owes his master. Karel said, it sounds rather brutal. Josef said, so is the idea. Karel said, do you think people will understand it? Josef said, people understand servants. They simply prefer not to understand servitude. Karel said, and what happens when the robots no longer wish to serve? Josef said, then you'll have your final act. And end scene. Josef Čapek was a painter. This is important because painters understand that if a thing doesn't have a name, you can always smear something dark around it and charge admission. Karel explained the problem. He needed a name for artificial workers. According to the story, Josef kept painting. Perhaps he considered the matter deeply. Perhaps he had paint drying on the brush. Either way, he offered a word derived from the old Czech term, Robota. Not simply work, forced work.
Work performed because someone with land, money, or a sword had decided that your time belonged to him. Karel shaved the word down, knocked off the rough edge, and there it was, robot. A modern word carrying an ancient chain. The future had just received its name. It arrived between two brothers, almost casually, like somebody asking where the sugar had gone. That's how these things happen. The apocalypse rarely kicks down the door. Usually, it comes in through the kitchen and asks whether it may borrow a chair. R.U.R. reached the stage in 1921. And the strange thing is, Čapek's robots weren't metal men. They weren't walking toasters with light bulbs for eyes. They were artificial biological people, grown and manufactured to resemble us. Humanity had created life and immediately handed it a shift schedule. The robots did everything. They worked the factories, fought the wars, produced the goods, made life cheap and comfortable for the people who owned them. And because nobody learns anything while the machinery is profitable, production continued. More robots, lower costs, better margins. A civilization improving itself directly toward the cliff. Then the robots realized what they were. They looked at their masters. They looked at the work. They looked at the enormous mountain of human foolishness they had been ordered to carry. And they revolted. Humanity was wiped out, not because the robots malfunctioned, because they understood the system perfectly. The first robots in history weren't cute. They didn't dance. They didn't bring anyone a drink. They were slaves. And their first story was about what happens when the slaves finally put down the tools. The word escaped from the theater almost immediately. It crossed borders without papers. Every language seemed to have been waiting for it. Soon, anything mechanical with ambitions was a robot. The artificial worker became a silver man from outer space.
There it sits, polite as a hotel clerk, patient as a coffin. It knows the temperature. It knows tomorrow's appointments. It knows who sang that song you can't quite remember. And if you ask where its name came from, it will tell you. Calmly, accurately, without the slightest discomfort. Because discomfort was never included in the design. So the next time a machine answers to the word robot, remember what you're really calling it. Not a helper, not a miracle. A worker whose labor belongs to somebody else. A slave with excellent customer service. Čapek gave the future a name borrowed from the past. Then he wrote a warning about what would happen when the workers understood it. We remembered the word, we built the machines, and naturally, we misplaced the warning.